Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. I do hope that you are doing well. I got three questions, which we'd have a big discussion about if you're in class. Do we have a right to believe what we want to believe? Do we have a right to say what we want? And do we have a right to advertise our beliefs? And I'm not just talking human rights, I'm talking moral rights. Difficult one, that one. Maybe message a friend, go onto WhatsApp and say, I'm doing this lesson with Mr. Shelton, and just share a thought on one of those questions. So most people will say, okay, we've got a right to believe what we want. But when we put that right into action, so a right to say what we want, well, that could cause offence, so possibly not. But advertise it? Well, if that causes offence, then maybe we shouldn't. And there's two examples here of terrorism, which are totally unacceptable. I bet you're pleased I'm said that. These are two examples of terrorism that happened because of beliefs, which were fundamentally. So you've got 9/11, that happened by Muslim terrorists, or should I say fundamental Islamic terrorists, and this happened because they believed that the West were wrong. Yes, there was political with that as well. And you've got Yehui Charlie, sorry, don't do French, sure some of you do, which is I Am Charlie. It comes from the Charlie Hebdo magazine, where they had published a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in that that was seen as very offensive within Islam. You don't draw pictures of the Prophet Muhammad. And so at that point, again, some fundamental Islamic terrorists went to the printers, went to the magazine people, and basically killed quite a few of them. Totally unacceptable. We have a right to believe what we want. We may have a right to say what we want, but do we have a right to advertise it? Okay, so who are these people and what do they have in common? Any ideas? Okay, well, hopefully you've got the top left, Martin Luther King. Then you might have Gandhi. Then you've got Nelson Mandela. Then you've probably got the ones that you don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson and Jama. Now, Martin Luther King broke the law. He dared suggest that black people and white people were equal. Gandhi dared suggest that the untouchables weren't in fact untouchable in India, and that India would be better without British rule. He broke the law. Nelson Mandela suggested that black people and white people would be the same in South Africa. Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson had a policy that said no sex before marriage. And no sex before marriage means no sex before marriage in their house. Now, they ran a bed and breakfast, which is kind of like a house, which is their own house, which they rent out rooms on an occasional basis for bed and breakfast. It's not quite the same as the hotel where you've got your own separate area. This is within somebody's house. Now, what Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson were committed, devout Christians. They believed that sex before marriage was wrong, and they had a clause to say unmarried people could not share the evening in the same bed together. Now, the issue came is that when they had this policy in place, it was impossible, it was against the law for homosexual people to be married. Therefore, a gay couple turned up and they were unable by law to be married. They were not allowed to spend the evening together in the same room. Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson were taken to court and they were found guilty of a discriminatory terms and conditions, which resulted in them losing their house for legal costs. Jama was a Muslim in Saudi Arabia who converted to Christianity, where it was in fact illegal to do so. He had to flee and become a refugee. So in all of these questions, all of these people broke the law. But the question is, were they right to do? Have a think about that while we have our cheesy intro sequence. our title today is, should we put faith before the law? Should we put faith before the law? And today we're going to explore cases in which the law conflicts with religious belief. Do write the title down. As always, do pause me as we go, and please send your work through to your teachers by the end of it. We're going to think about our value of integrity today. Okay, integrity being putting your money where your mouth is and standing by what you believe. So it's going to be a good lesson if you can give or explain how Britain shows freedom of religious expression. Great if you can give clear examples of times that Britain has both shown freedom and how it's not, and even better if you can evaluate if religious freedom actually does exist in the UK today or not. We're going to think about people, we've done that. We're going to think about situations. We're not going to do 4 case studies because you're at home, so we're going to look at 2, and there'll be an exam question as well. So to start off with, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create this table. Now it is in the description below if you wanted to access that and just type straight in it. That's absolutely fine and dandy, or you can just draw it out in your book if you wish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 4 different situations. You need to pause them at the end of each time, and you need to answer those questions. So scenario 1. During World War times, conscription, which is forcing men to join the army and fighting for your country, is acceptable by law. However, many Christians are against violence. Should a Christian call to fight? Let me go over that again. During World War times, conscription, which is joining people to join the army, and fighting for your country are accepted by law. But many Christians are against violence. Should a Christian fight? Pause me now while you give that a go. Then we'll go on to number 2. Scenario 2. The law accepts that many shops can open on a Sunday. If a contract was to change, meaning that someone has to work a Sunday, should they follow the law or the 10 Commandments that state that the holy day should be kept as a day of rest? I'll read it again. The law states that many shops can open on a Sunday, but if a contract was to change, meaning someone has to work on a Sunday, should a Christian follow the law or the 10 Commandments, which state the holy day should be a day of rest? Okay, scenario 3. Abortion is legal in most countries as long as it satisfies the stated conditions like 2 doctors agree and it's before 24 weeks. Many religions, however, believe in the sanctity of life, and you know that means all life is sacred and only God can take a life. This is the question. In a case of rape, what should be recommended from a Christian perspective? In the case of rape, what should be recommended? And lastly then, scenario 4. Most religions teach that we do not have the right to take the life of another person. How can a Christian cope with capital cases of capital punishment if their spouse is killed and the law allows capital punishment? Let me say that again. Most religions teach that we do not have the right to take the life of another. How can a Christian cope with cases of capital punishment or the death penalty if their spouse, that's their husband or wife, is killed and the law allows for the death penalty? Okay, so hopefully you've got that grid complete. Lots of that is your opinion, but I want you to be thinking that through. So we haven't yet really covered any of those, but we have started to break the ground on it a little bit. What I'd like you to do is we're going to think about religion and the place of religion in society today. So I'm going to ask you to look at 2 cases. Now, I would have asked you to do 4. In fact, all 4 are in the description below, but I'd like you to just choose 2 of them. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to summarise 2 of the cases. You can choose which 2 and write down why you think the Christian might think they should win the case, why the person might have lost the case, and do you think the person, in your own opinion, should have won or lost the case, and why? Okay, so summarise each case and then say why might the Christian have thought they should win, why may the person have lost the case, and do you think the person should have won or why? So you're going to choose 2 of the scenarios, which we've got listed below. Give that a go. You'll need to pause me when you and come back to me when you're done. Okay, so I think you can see there that it is actually quite difficult to make that judgment. Now, there was a case in Ireland, again, the days before gay marriage was legalised, but it was only legalised in Ireland a lot more recently than it was in England, where there were two bakers, and they, again, committed Christians. They were asked to create a cake, bake a cake, and on it put the message of support gay marriage. Now, they didn't believe that they wanted to say support gay marriage, and so what they did was they offered the couple the chance to have a different message or to go to another cake shop. This couple took the bakers to court, and the bakers were found to be guilty of homophobia or homophobic discrimination. They argued that in fact their faith was putting that perspective in, and what then happened was very interesting. They took it to appeal, and they won on appeal because they basically argued that they weren't discriminating against the customers, they just had an issue with the message. And the law kind of indicated at that point that it was okay to serve. You had a responsibility to serve people and not discriminate against them, but you couldn't be forced to advertise something you didn't believe in. So that was a rather interesting example. And again, in the UK, I like to call that the gay bakers, but they weren't gay. That was the whole point. But it was an interesting case nonetheless. And the question is, should you put your faith first? Should you be doing this personal conviction thing that we spoke about earlier? Now, what I'd like you to do is have a quick read over of this and answer those two questions that are the bottom. Okay, so have a read over that and answer those two questions that are at the bottom. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, have a read over it, and I'm going to just explain it in a second to you. Okay, so Jesus is asked, is it right to pay taxes or not? Now, the time that Jesus is being asked it's a very religious society, and they didn't particularly like the Romans, so was it right to pay the taxes to Romans? And what Jesus did here very cleverly was he took a Roman coin and he said, well, whose face is on it? They said, well, it's Caesar's, as the king's, like we have the queen on the back of our coins. And Jesus said, well, in which case, give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God what's God's. So in other words, make sure you give your dues. Stick by the law and do what the country tell you, but also make sure that you serve God. That's the summary. How is it a sin, and how is it potentially a crime? Well, if Jesus said that it was right to pay taxes, the Jewish people felt at that time that that was actually going against God, but Jesus said it wasn't. Was it a crime? Well, it could have been to actually turn around and said that you weren't willing to pay your tax. In fact, that would have been a crime, and that would have been punishable. But think about the cases we've looked at today. Were they sins, or were they crimes, or were they just best avoided, but they were possible to do? So what we've done is we have thought about how Britain shows religious freedoms, and we've realised that is actually quite sketchy. Great if you can give clear examples of a time that Britain's shown freedom or not. And again, hopefully you've got those two case studies. And even better if you can evaluate if religious freedom still exists in the UK. And that's what we're going to do now. So this is our sort of final question. And the question is this: people should have the right to believe and act as they wish. I'm going to suggest that you think about your tall items at this point and your case studies that we've talked about. I also suggest that you use farm for, against, rebuttal, my opinion, because if you do that, you'll be hitting some of these arguments. You don't desperately need to refer to a non-religious argument, but you can if you so choose. However, I would just go with, for some Christians think this, with a quote, again, maybe an example. Again, some people think this, again with a quote and an example. Rebuttal, at that point could be non-religious. and then a conclusion. Do you think people have the right to believe and act as they wish, based on the work you've done over the last few lessons? Now, it's a 12-mark question, so it's going to take you 12 minutes. It's going to be a fairly chunky answer. So I'm going to shut up now. Now you get on with that. Remember your tool item quotes. Remember farm. Pause me now, and then come back to me. Okay, so with that done, this is how you mark it. I'm not going to go through it all with you. I've done that quite a lot of times in different videos, but you can read that over my shoulder. So give yourself a grade, say what you need to do to improve. I'm going to leave that there. Thanks for your time. Take care of yourself, stay safe, wash your hands, God bless you, and I'll be seeing you soon.